The truth is with AI, as you develop the skills to learn how to prompt it, it's actually not a hassle. It feels very natural. Different companies do different things with user stories. Sometimes they're very big, sometimes they're very small. And AI does substantially better if you give it broad context but discrete tasks. I'll buy you a beer if you can find two developers that agree wholly on what good code looks like. They want you as a user to feel like there's some magic in it just generating code.
In software development process, where you see AI tools really doing a good job.
It feels like, you can do more and more and more, and you're only limited by your imagination. You could create software at the speed of thought. Every developer in the world should be engaging with AI. If you are not, you are risking falling into obscurity.
Welcome. This is an Hour of Innovation podcast. I'm your host, Lyoshin. Austin Vance, co-founder and CEO of Focused, joins me today to discuss how AI is changing the way software gets built, from automated parts of the development process to writing highly accurate code. Welcome, Austin. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So before we start digging into the questions, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you do?
Yeah, totally. I'm the CEO, like you said, of Focused, and I founded it just over 6 years ago. And time just flies. It feels like just a month ago. I was sitting in my co-founder's living room trying to get our first client. So that's crazy. But I'm not trying to be a CEO. We're playing CEO. I write code. So I'm a software developer by trade. I write code every day still. It's honestly how I unwind that, solving problems and building software, whether it's something small or big or a script, is just I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, sounds good. A very unusual story of a CEO who, writes code and doesn't do CEO job.
Well, I still have to do the CEO job, but it's, I try to make as much of that job about being on top of current technology. And the only way I think
right.
you can read a ton, but I don't know, in Good Will Hunting, there's that you can read all about the world, but have you really experienced it kind of thing? And you have to write. You write code and you can see how these tools, these frameworks, actually feel versus just being reading about it.
Yeah, no, it's good to have hands-on experience, and especially when you're trying to help your customers with the same thing, you can actually speak what your experience is.
Totally.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let's start with AI-driven development, the new term, right? And what are some of the bottlenecks you've seen in the industry of people just adopting this?
Yeah, I think so. The industry loves the term vibe coding, and I'm I tend to just I don't know, that term kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. I don't know if it you mention it in a boardroom or to an enterprise architect, and they're no, we're not going to vibe code here. And so I think a lot about how you use AI, or I've been, how we can use AI to help develop and build software inside of existing systems. And to me, vibe coding is, going from 0 to 1 for a SaaS product or a single feature. And AI-driven development to me is the idea of using artificial intelligence to drive the architecture, the design, and the features inside of your system. So I grew up working at companies that always did test-driven development. And so I would TDD everything. I mean, you did that red, green refactor. So write a test, run the test, watch it fail, write the code, run the test, watch it go green, and then refactor your code. And I actually think that same methodology, I call it test or AI-driven development, because that same methodology is how you should write code with AI. And one of the big hurdles people run into is they think that you can release an agent into a scaled code base. And it doesn't have to be legacy. It could be a modern code base written in a modern language and all that kind of stuff. But just existing code with, tens and hundreds of thousands of lines, and you think you can release an agent into it and it'll just like write good software. And that's not the case. It's the same as like, I can't release a developer into an existing system and just expect them like right away to write good software. I have to control context. So I give my developer a feature and I tell them kind of where in the architecture that feature needs to go. I scope down like the patterns in the code base. So, hey, we're using a service pattern or a controller pattern here. This is an MVC style application. Like those things AI needs to have as well. And I think people overestimate the capabilities of AI, especially when they're not vibe coding, but they're like driving software with artificial intelligence. And the first thing I would do, and we can talk about this, but like start with tests. We've seen a ton of value writing or generating test code, making sure that test code reinforces the behavior that we would want, same as I would do test-driven development. And then you go to your AI and you say, can you make these tests pass? And you even give it the opportunity to run the test. So it can like generate code, make the test pass, and then it's good. And then you can look at the code it generated and you do the exact same thing. I'm going to refactor. So you generated 3 methods that all do the exact same thing, kind of like, let's dry that up. Or you put a whole bunch of behavior inside of this one class, and maybe that should be extracted into its own class to be single responsibility. Let's refactor that and like, extract that. And so that exact same workflow works really well with AI. That's the biggest hurdle, is people just over expect the ability of AI in existing systems, because you can generate so much in a zero. You open up Replit or V0 and you're just like, write me an app. And it's like, whoa, it did. But then you give it a real code base that's scaled and has integrations and databases and history. And it fails. It doesn't work. And people think, well, then it can't write real code. And that's not true. It can. Yeah. You're just applying the tool wrong.
Yeah. I have a few questions for you regarding that down the road. So we'll talk about those hype tools that generate a bunch of code and how people feel about them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, love to talk about them.
Yeah. So another thing is, basically it makes sense. Like a normal human developer joins the team, and that person needs a little bit of a time to understand what the product does and what the code is and things like that. That we see that every day teams. So same basically happens with AI agent. And some people may say, well, you can actually like try to train that agent on your code and have it run for a while and figure it out and then be trained. But in practice, it doesn't happen, right?
In practice, and that's if you're training in the true sense of training an LLM, that's like, it's exceptionally expensive and actually fairly unnecessary. All language models, even like Gemini and the new ChatGPTs they have a context window, whether they're huge or small, they have a context window, and people have one too. And the way we've architected software throughout, all the patterns we have to architect software are about controlling context for a person. We use object-oriented design to tell people, this class is the user, so it's going to deal with stuff that does what needs to do, a user needs to do, log in, or maybe it's, address and other stuff. AI needs context. And so if you just YOLO a feature into an agent and not hand it the right context and help gear it towards where it needs to go, it will struggle the same way a person will. And it will do the same thing a reasonably good developer would do, which is probably write the feature, but in the wrong place. And then you're like, well, it's generating spaghetti code. It's mixing responsibilities. It's because the same way a new developer to a project would not know that there was a whole other auth component. The AI didn't know there was another auth component because you didn't give it that context. And so that is the single largest hurdle we get and the single largest objection we get. As I tried to write a feature, I pasted in my user story, and the AI wrote some spaghetti slop in the middle of the code base and generated a whole bunch of files. And why didn't it go here? And it's like, well, because you didn't apply the tool in a way that it understood where to do these things. And
so it seems like this agent or this code writing tool need to have like a project manager or somebody, or product manager rather, telling it what exactly to do and in a bunch of context.
It's a combination of it's like developers, as you move up in your development career, you become more product oriented by nature. Like, because you start to understand the system as a whole, you understand the business as a whole, you understand what features the system is capable of or not, and what's easy or hard. AI demands that even more of a developer. You have to be an architect, you have to be a product person, you have to understand design a little bit more. And all of those things need to get fed into an agent or an assistant to help you drive real code. But at the end of the day, a developer is still clicking. You should be clicking accept. You should be reading the code the AI is writing. You should be coaching it to refactor in a way that's appropriate for that code base. And you can, and it does exceptionally well, and it's faster than you or than a developer pecking out every character. But, just releasing it, hitting accept all changes, and then giving it a new feature and saying accept all changes, eventually, just like with a human developer, that code will get unmaintainable.
So you mentioned that you feel like writing tests first using AI is a great way to start. Are there any other areas in software development process where you see AI tools really doing a good job?
Yeah, I follow like this decompose, plan, execute kind of pattern for when we use AI. So, different companies do different things with user stories. Sometimes they're very big, sometimes they're very small. And AI does substantially better if you give it broad context but discrete tasks. And so what I will do if I have a reasonably sized user story, say, I don't know, a really simple one is like implement a password reset functionality. So password reset is like a couple of screens. There's like a screen to like put in your email address, a screen that confirms that it sent something. There's an email that needs to go out. There's something that you come back to when you click your email to like put in your new password, and then a confirmation there. And then there's some other, there's back end and front end all around all that. And so you can use AI in like the decompose step to say, okay, what are all the features, like discrete tasks that a system would need to do password reset? And it can create, each one of those as an independent artifact or a story. And then you say, cool, I'm going to take that first one. Now let's write some tests to say, I can click the password reset link, I can go to a new screen, and I can enter my email, right? So that's a full feature. I don't even click like reset password yet. I just enter an email so it's an input on another screen. AI then goes and does that. You have your integration tests that are UI. You have some unit tests that make sure some stuff is happening on your front end. And then you like say, cool, next feature. I want to be able to click reset password. And as soon as I click reset password, and I fire off an email. So then I write those tests. I have AI help me generate those tests. Then I have AI help me generate the code that passes those tests. Then I pick the next one. So that like the way I use AI is that like decompose, execute kind of cycle. And then you mix in that red, green refactor testing cycle with it, and it's super powerful. The other place I find it really, really valuable, and this is like, this was the first way I started using AI in code, and it was like my aha moment for how powerful this stuff is my company. We spend a lot of time, we get hired to work inside of legacy systems fairly often. And so there might not be a subject matter expert for the whole system. And so I can start using the AI as that, help me explore a code base. And so I can pull a code base in and say, hey, like, where do you think the networking logic is? And it'll like start at the controller layer and like work its way off. Okay, where's the integration with, who knows, Twilio? Where's the Twilio integration and how's that managed? Oh, there's a Twilio class that Twilio service that abstracts all the Twilio API calls. And like AI gives you this like kind of subject matter expert that helps you control and explore a code base. So then you can be an architect and tell it like, okay, now we're going to add a new feature to Twilio, which is like a callback. So focus on the Twilio class. Now let's like work on calling a user calling a user back if they left a message or something like that.
Okay, so basically you analyze the code to understand the requirements, basically kind of like reverse engineering really quick to understand which code is responsible for what parts and how it all ties together, like building, I don't know, like a diagram or something of all these different parts and components. That's pretty cool. I went to a conference last year and there was one speaker and he was actually saying how AI can help exactly what you said, basically analyze the code and spin back all the user stories and product requirements and build like a normal human readable documents of what the system does.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
And in these legacy systems, like there's always like a cohort of people at a company that want to like rewrite a whole system. You have like a monolith and they're like, and I heard this recently, and it's the definition of legacy or a legacy system is when no one at the company or the company itself cannot hold the full context of a system in their head or in the company. So the system is large enough that not one or a whole team understands every part of the system. And that happens fairly quickly at most companies. And so AI can help bridge the gap as you're moving to having legacy software inside of your organization. And even startups have it because they'll have a service that, one guy wrote and then he left, or we wrote and we just set it and forget it. Now we need to change it, but it's been 2 years. And AI can be like, hey, what is this doing? Why is it there? And if you're thinking about doing a rewrite or a large scale refactor, maybe moving from monolith to microservice, and AI can help you understand all of the like non-obvious edges of a system that are the ones that like keep a large scale migration or refactor or rewrite from ever being successful. And so you can get much better insight into like the complexity of implementation.
I see. Okay. So to my earlier question, we have this bunch of code generating tools right now. Like I know a few myself, even though I'm not a developer, like a Copilot would be one famous, I guess. What do you think about the level of expertise, if you will? Like, are there junior developers? Are there senior developers? Or it doesn't really matter? They're all like the same, pretty much.
You mean like, is the tool a junior or senior developer, or like?
Right. The code that it generates, is it like really good quality code, or is it like somewhat and you have to rework it?
A non-technical prompter will generate junior level code. Senior developer, principal level architect, software engineer will generate senior level, well architected and incredible code. The more powerful the tool, the more skill that is required out of like the pilot. And so if you're using V0 to generate a landing page, that code doesn't need to be crazy good. It needs to be a good looking landing page. And a lot of junior developers or non-developers can use Replit, V0, Bolt, Lovable, all these types of things to go and generate that. But as soon as you get into the world of Cursor, Windsurf, Copilot, although Copilot's not that good, frankly, as you get into these more powerful kind of coding assistants that live inside of your code base inside of an IDE, a unskilled developer will struggle very quickly with the code that these things are capable of generating, and they can do significant damage to a code base if they're not controlled. And so like that's the rule. That's how you you have to guide it through its architecture. You have to guide it through its planning. You have to guide it through where it's going. And then you have to be accountable for the code that it generates. Same way I don't just like blindly accept a pull request. Oh, yep, pull request is accepted. Like I don't blindly accept AI written code. I review it. I make sure it makes sense. And then I can prompt that AI to re-architect in a way that does. And I'm that pilot.
So what do you think, what kind of education or training do you think developers need to be able to come up with those intelligent prompts for AI?
God, I think the best way to learn how to do it is like start doing it. Of course there's going to be like coding boot camps that pop up on how to like vibe code, the next big app and stuff like that. But right now the space is moving so fast and these tools they're exceptionally powerful, but they have very few guardrails built into them. Like you'll see posts on LinkedIn or X or something that'll say like, I, built a SaaS product and then Cursor deleted my whole code base. And it's like, well, a good developer or a more senior developer has also had that experience. They wrote a bunch of code. They forgot to make incremental commits. And they're like trying to Command Z their way back to something that worked. And it's like, oh, I lost history. But then you like, as soon as you get burned by that as a senior developer, you're like, okay, cool. I know how to I'm going to make incremental commits. I'm going to check my work. And then like when I finally get this all done, I'll squash all these commits up into one package and I'll make a PR. And the same is true for someone using an AI tool. You get burned and then you learn how these other parts of the ecosystem can support you. And so the best way to do it is use it and know that like if you're building complex systems, the AI will create complex problems. But that's true about a human developer too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even with my simple use cases, whenever I use AI tool, I use one, I use Grok or ChatGPT. They have these different tabs, if you will, of history of prompts. And if I'm talking about creating landing page, that's the only tab I use.
Yep.
If I'm talking about I don't know, something else, that I have a special app for it.
Yep.
I
So
don't
I'll
mix it all in one place.
I'll like take a tab, exactly. Or like in Cursor, you take a chat and you drop in your first message in a chat is like the feature you want to work on. Yeah, and then as soon as I get that feature to a place where I feel good, I make a commit. And then I open a new chat and I'm like, okay, now let's, start the next feature versus just like continuing to rip through code. Because then all of a sudden you get to, 3 hours, 4 hours in and it deleted something or broke something that you didn't really know. And you're testing that before like kind of pushing everything up and leaving for the day. And you're like, whoa, where'd it break? But if you're making these incremental commits, if you're checking your work, if you have a good test suite built into the app, like you can trust that a developer can work in it. The reason we write tests, and I will like scream this from the rooftop, stand on a soapbox, the reason developers should write tests is not because it prevents bugs, is not because it creates better architectures. Those are side effects. The reason we write tests is it enables developers to change the code with impunity. I can change things in the code base and the tests tell me if I broke something unintended. A well-tested code base can be edited by AI with the same impunity.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's talk about these tools. You mentioned a couple of them that generate you a code with a simple prompt, like you mentioned Bolt and Lovable and all these other guys. User basically enters something simple like build me landing page for SaaS product, and it generates a bunch of code. Are those tools? What level do you think those tools are? Are they what they are not doing well yet, or what they're doing well? Basically, I guess I'm trying to get to.
They are good at developing in a vacuum. And so like if you're building a landing page, if you're building a SaaS product that is fairly isolated, they're decent at it. They struggle with large features inside of complex systems. So as the complexity of a V0 or a Lovable code base grows, Lovable will struggle too. And they lack the ability for you to control the context. Like they've taken that away from the developer because they want you as a user to feel like there's some magic in it just generating code. But as code bases get complex, you have to control that context. So I think the level they are is like a mid-junior developer, kind of right in that range. You can give them fairly discrete feature inside of a vacuum. The complexity arises. Real code bases, in scaled code bases, the complexity sits in the integrations, not in the business logic. How do you integrate multiple systems, external parties, data systems? How do you keep everything in sync? That's where complexity really lies in systems. And V0, Lovable, Bolt, all these things don't do integrations. They just don't, right? Like it's not their goal.
Yeah. Let me give you an example, and I'm curious to see what your opinion on this. So I'm not going to name the tool, but I've tried something. I generated the web page, and it's basically like a web page with a bunch of forms on it, like creating new records, basically. And it didn't do the job from my first simple prompt. And then I asked the tool to add a form with specific fields and ability to create the record. And it did that. But then when I hit save, nothing gets saved.
Yep.
So my question is like, doesn't not have database at the end? Does it generate just simply like HTML and JavaScript and that's it?
A lot of those do. So like some of these tools now integrate SaaS database providers like Supabase or something like that. So you can like connect them. And they are incredibly powerful. Like if you're a young founder or an early stage founder and you're non-technical, they can be a great way to get a working prototype or even your first kind of release. But at the end of the day, like they're making tooling decisions for you because it's only the integrations they support. You have to know how to kind of coax it into, like you said, saving in a real database. And then like where a skilled developer will start to think about the future of a system. So where you're going to have these forms, but then in the future, those forms are going to become bigger and we're going to need to query the data in this way. And they'll think about a database architecture that is scaled to the future of the company, but doesn't introduce complexity too early. And AI just doesn't do that very well. It thinks inside of its feature.
Yeah. So like you said before, it probably, I as a user have to be really educated on the
Correct.
really good prompts and say exactly what I want.
Yep.
With all details and everything. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are any of these tools something that they completely cannot do right now? I think you mentioned a couple of things like integrations to third parties or something.
These SaaS tools really aren't good at like working in large. They just don't work if I have an existing product. So say I'll just pick a random like mid-tier startup. So I said Twilio earlier. So I'm a random senior developer at Twilio. I can't like clone my code base into one of these SaaS tools like Lovable or Bolt and say, I want to add a feature where, we add 2FA or something like that. It just, those tools aren't designed for that. It's not their purpose, but there are tools that are, but they expect the pilot to be much more, a much stronger software developer than some of these SaaS tools do. That's not to say like I have a client they're an AI startup and the CEO is non-technical and he spends a lot of his time in Lovable, like building prototype so that he can go give and feeling how that prototype would work and like understanding kind of the UX, and then he goes and gives a much more well thought set of features and ones that he's even kind of played with to his dev team. Where before they might take the first pass and that takes them a few weeks and he's like, it's not really where I want it, but I want to keep moving. Like the ability for him as the CEO to iterate on even his vision inside of one of these tools is exceptionally valuable. And then he goes and says like, here's what I figured out in my prototyping. How do we turn this into production software? And then they go and rebuild it as a production system inside of a code base that's in GitHub and all that other stuff.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just either, yeah, okay. Are there any tools that have some sort of assistant in assistant to guide user and to help user was like, I don't understand this or clarify this, or AI is just like dumb thing and just repeats and tries to get the best output. Just like you see, what I'm trying to say is in ChatGPT, sometimes I say something and I kind of know the answer, but I want to double check. And AI gives me something completely irrelevant or crazy. And I try to rephrase my prompt again and again, add more details. Yeah. Does the same thing happens with code?
It does, but that's why I take this like kind of plan a whole feature inside of AI. So I'm like, I will start my first prompt on a new feature with like, do not write any code, but like, tell me what you think this is supposed to do. Where would you do it? Let's talk about this feature. And we go back and forth for a while and they say, cool, break down all of this into, a series of discrete tasks, and put that into a markdown document. And then I start a new chat and I say, okay, the first our first feature is this. Here's your first markdown. Like, here's your first discrete task, right? And so I coax the AI into doing that. You can solve that with like in Cursor, you can do cursor rules. So you can solve that like don't execute. You can say like only do what I tell you. Don't write code without asking for approval first, or like, and it works fairly well. But this like, decomposing a large task into discrete executables and then working through them is how I solve that problem. Because it does happen all the time. The AIs are like, they're designed to please. Like they're kind of like golden retrievers, right? Like they want to make you happy. And sometimes they even make shit up because they're like, they just want to like please you as a user. And so you have to, especially when working in code, you have to kind of break them of that. Because if you don't monitor it, pilot it, it'll like pretend a whole, set of functionality in your app already exists and then integrate with it. And you're like, what are you integrating with? I don't use Postgres. Why are you writing code that integrates with Postgres or something like that? Like it'll just make something up. And so you have to really understand how to pilot these systems. But when you do, the code you write is exceptional and the results and the features you ship are faster.
Yeah, it's the same experience I have with just regular ChatGPT, I guess, with normal language. It's just, like you said, it tries to please you and it gives you anything just to say, look how smart I am, this is your result, and it doesn't make sense.
And you're like, that's not true. Like you just made that up. And the other big limitation, especially in software, but it exists inside of ChatGPT too, is like, these LLMs are trained to a date. And so anything that happens after that date, like now a lot of them have access to the internet and they'll go search and do stuff like that, but they're trained to a date. So like a good example is like a new version of React will come out, but the model is trained on an older version. And so you have to be very good at telling it how to use, don't use the old version, use the new version. Here's the documentation for the new version. And you as a developer have to help the AI engage with something that it wasn't trained on. And it actually can be a significant problem if you're not paying attention, because it'll start using old APIs that are getting deprecated. It'll do things that are like in old data. And it might even be fine. It might be code that will run, but it's not. If you were a human developer, you would never do that, because you would go to, react.com or whatever their website is. You'd see the new documentation. You build it in the most modern way, versus this thing never goes and checks. You have to give it documentation to reference and yeah.
I see. Okay. It looks like it's a lot of hassle to deal with it. Is it even easier to just do it old-fashioned way, or should people like try and hustle through this?
So I mean, we're seeing massive productivity increases by development teams using these things.
Okay.
But like with any tool, like if I don't know how technical your audience is, but like if I'm used to writing, kind of regular scripts and code, and then someone hands me a full scale framework like Spring Boot or Ruby on Rails, and I'm like, wow, it's a lot of hassle. I have to put my code in a certain structure, and I have to write it a certain way. It's like I could just write the code. And those abstractions always come with the cost of learning the abstraction, like learning the tool. And it's our job as engineers, as developers, as professionals to say like, well, what does it enable going forward? And the truth is with AI, as you develop the skills to learn how to prompt it, it's actually not a hassle. It feels very natural. And, along with growing up TDDing, the first developer job I had a pair. I was pair programming, 2 people, 1 computer, like sitting side by side in an office, which is totally wild now. No one goes to an office, but like, literally in an office, 2 keyboards, 2 mice, and the AI feels like I have a pair. If I treat it that way, and pairing, even though when you bring a person who's never paired before, I had the privilege of like, I learned how to code with a pair, but if I'm a developer who programmed solo for most of my career and then I went someplace that did pair program, I have to learn how to articulate the code I'm writing. I have to learn how to talk about it. I have to learn how to explain it. I have to learn how to take feedback on it. But when I do learn all those skills, the code I write is better. and the pair is fast. The pair of developers is faster than two developers solo.
Yeah.
And the same is true for AI. As I might go I'm going to go slower for a little while as I learn to use a tool, but I'm going slower to learn to go faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. There is a saying like in business, right? If you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, take like a partner with you.
Yep. And I think AI kind of can be that partner. It can help developers so well. We have this, kind of experiment we're running where we even have an AI. It watches like client CI, and the second CI goes red, so continuous integration pipeline, a test fails in CI. Instead of a human developer, you see the CI pipeline went red. I have to stop doing what I was doing. I pull down that commit. I go fix the test. I push it back up, but that's all good. And AI looks at the failed pipeline and submits a pull request to make that pass before a human even has to review it. And then a human just reviews that, they fixed the bug. Oh, you accidentally, I don't know, you created a compile error over here, or you accidentally misnamed a variable, you fat fingered something, and you have a reference error or whatever it is. CI catches that, and that's what it's for, and AI can fix that, and a developer never has to break focus on whatever they are working on in order to go fix that now.
Yeah. So that's good. That's what I was going to talk about next is quality of the code and how AI can help us achieve it. And you mentioned a couple of things already with tests and things like that. How about refactoring, especially in your case, dealing with legacy systems? Can it, on top of analysis, how can it help with refactoring or adding tests, integration tests, all of that stuff?
Yeah, so refactoring means something very specific to me, and it means to refactor a system means to change the structure of code without changing the behavior of the system, right? So if you can agree on that, there is only one way that you can know you're doing a refactor, and there's only one way you can know you're doing a refactor, which is to have good tests, because tests ensure that the behavior of the system is as expected. And so if you have good tests, AI can be an exceptional partner at refactoring. And it can test the behavior of the, your tests can ensure that the code the AI writing is not changing overarching behaviors of the system or even discrete behaviors of individual components or interfaces. If you don't have tests and you ask AI to refactor something, all you're doing is asking it to rewrite. And you're going to spend a ton of time trying to make sure it didn't break anything, especially if it's a large scale refactor. Like I'm going to decompose this, one service into 3 smaller microservices. Like that can be an incredibly difficult thing. But if you have smoke tests that test the API and you start to decompose it, and AI breaks it into 3 smaller microservices, and you make sure that the API is still working, still run the same calls, they still come back the same way, then it's the same way a human developer would do it.
Okay. And then on top of just satisfying the tests, are there anything developers have to do or AI is capable to do to ensure the code is actually good? It's not like, sometimes you can write like 10 lines versus 2 and it does the same thing. That kind of stuff.
I'll buy you a beer if you can find 2 developers that agree wholly on what good code looks like. So, good code is so subjective. And so that, what is good code? The goal of writing good code is so that a developer can come into that code base and understand context quickly. And so that's why we don't have duplication. So I can understand the context of what a method would do. That's why we use good variable names and good class names and object orientation or good functional patterns. Those things allow developers to take context more quickly so they can edit code more quickly. And
I see.
Yes, AI can write great code if that's your definition. But a whole bunch of, like I said, you put a handful of developers in a room and they'll argue about what good code is. And that's actually a good thing because they're all arguing how to make code more readable, more understandable, structured in a way someone new could come into the code base and handle it better. It can scale but not be overly complex. And there's many times in my career where I've sat with developers and one of us will be saying, I think that this, this component should be 2 components, and another person is saying, no, it should be 1 component, or this class should be, 3 classes. Look how big it's getting. And they're saying, no, it's all the same responsibility. And that debate still can happen with an AI. And the cool thing is, with an AI, I can decompose and put back together much more quickly because it can write those things. As long as I have my tests, it can write those things for me.
Yeah, you can like kind of like A/B test it and see which ones works better, more sustainable, and things like that. Yeah, that's great.
And you give the AI so all code bases have patterns, right? Like, oh, we use 2 spaces instead of 4. We use, camel case instead of snake case. There's a bunch of patterns that code bases will put in the formatting rules that auto format your code, and you'll make decisions like we don't use ternaries, we use if thens, and like all this kind of stuff. The AI can get those rules too, and should. Like, you should give those same rules to an AI so it writes code in the same style as people do. Now, a crazy one, I know you're supposed to ask the questions, but can I ask you one? Am I allowed?
Sure, yeah.
If all of these patterns are for people, so like a programming language is a human interface to machine code. Like, at one point, if AI gets strong enough, like, do we need good code? Like, does it actually matter if the code is good? I don't know if the bytecode that comes out of a Java, compilation is good bytecode. It's fast. That's its job. That's what good is in that case. Like, do I need good code if AI can write, edit, design, build, change code, and not break things?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. And I think at least half of the business people asking there, what's the benefit of refactoring, for example, right? Or code that if you've written it in a little bit clumsy way, but it still works, why do we need to invest time and change it? I'm, as a project manager, constantly having these conversations in my teams and arguments like, no, we have to do it because otherwise we can't do something else faster.
Yep.
And business person is like, I don't care. We'll get to it when we'll get to it.
And it's a healthy tension, right? Like the metaphor of technical debt makes sense. Like, if you write something that's tough to change in the future, that starts to accumulate debt. And that can weigh down the code base. Now, if that single, if it's a script or a single system and I don't change that for 5 years, maybe it doesn't matter. But if I'm going to be hyper focused on this system for the next, year, building it out, scaling it, adding features to it, I want to continually add and kind of clean the kitchen while I cook, so that each meal is just as easy as the last meal. And that debt, I keep paying it down so that it doesn't ever weigh me down so much that I can't do anything. But if AI, there's a pattern in software development called dry, do not repeat yourself. So you might have two functions that do the same thing. So I would collapse them into one function. And then those two do one thing, and I just use that one function in 2 places, right? But you could ask you should, as a developer, start to ask yourself the question, is that good for people or is that good for AI? Right? And if we have the same function twice and AI can read the whole code base or be given context and it only edits that one function and it doesn't change behavior over here, it might be easier for AI to actually have duplication in a code base. It might be easier for AI to have, more behavior in a single file because it can reason about it better. And it might make it harder for a human to reason about it. And so right now we're in this weird place because humans still write most of the code and should, and at least approve, read, and understand. But as we move over that tipping point, the patterns that we do that are good software will change to be what is good for, instead of being what is good for a person, it'll be what is good for AI. But they'll have the same intent, which is how do we enable change in this system over time?
That's a little bit scary at the same time, just to let AI completely write everything and rely and without getting under the hood, if you will. But some people may have different opinions.
It's scary now because developers have meticulously crafted the modern world. Yeah. And now through, pecking out individual characters on a keyboard. But as more and more time has passed, we've, even in my career and, 15 to 20 years of writing software, I write substantially less code than, people did before me. I don't write machine code. It gets compiled. I don't write, HTTP logic into a code base. I don't write HTTP logic into a code base. I use a framework that handles HTTP. Like those types of things are they're abstracted. And AI can add this next level of abstraction to our systems and our development, which allows us to build more things that are cooler, faster.
That's great, because I had another question for you. Like, for example, we have in networking, for example, we have these different protocols like HTTP, HTTPS, or TCP/IP, whatever. They're standard. These protocols work in any system that you're trying to build. Do you see this maybe trend, or did you hear anything that with AI we could have those like generic default components, if you will, for certain use cases that we will never even have to worry about? We just plug them in and they work, like, I don't know, let's say like payment processing, like for
so people are
login.
People are trying. There's a new standard that's called the MCP, the Model Context Protocol, and then there's the other one that Google just released, the A to A, agent to agent protocol. So it's like, how do you have agents communicate with APIs or with each other, and like what is the agreement, the contract that exists between these two systems? Because that's really what the HTTP is a standard contract that exists, saying, hey, when I send you a series of packets, they're going to come in this order, and you're going to be able to like read them out in this way, and you'll get something that's meaningful. And so then I don't have to think through, okay, I'm going to do mine my way, and they're going to do theirs their way. And so there are huge attempts, and I think there's a lot of value creation to be had in like, how do we allow agents to interact with the tools we've already built? And so like, right now you'll see things like ChatGPT has Operator, and there's like Manus, and there's tools that can like go click around the internet. But as things get more and more, AI gets more and more powerful, and the user of systems moves from being a person to being an agent, agent-friendly APIs, whatever that standard ends up being, will become a standard implementation. And if I'm a car rental company, I will want agents to be able to like look at my inventory, see the dates, know the pricing, make a booking, do a payment. And I'll have that designed in a way just like a REST API, but it's something that an agent knows how to manage, use, talk to, parse, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it can also be like adaptable to situation.
Yep.
And kind of change decisions by itself, I guess. Yeah,
Yep.
That would be pretty cool. That's like, I don't know how fast we're gonna get there, but it would be cool to see.
I think it'll be awesome. I'm like, I continue to be just like exceptionally optimistic about the changes that AI is introducing to the development workflows, to product workflows. It feels like, you can do more and more and more, and you're only limited by your imagination. You could create software at the speed of thought.
Yeah. So, question about databases. Are there any AI who can do the same thing basically they're doing with code, but do with databases? Like architect them, design, create tables, relationships, all that stuff?
Most can. So like most of the core foundational models can look at databases, create them, or generate the SQL that would do that. And then you can use MCP to actually run that SQL. Like, and I actually had a kind of cool aha moment. We had a big, kind of very wide and denormalized legacy SQL database. And I plugged in an agent and I gave it the schema. And then I started using natural language to ask questions like, how many users logged in between these two times? What is the cart drop-off rate for, these products? And it was generating fairly complex, SQL with, nice joins, all that stuff kind of together, and was dumping that out to me. And then even cooler, I could say, okay, now do that, but plot it over the last 6 months on a graph. And it would generate like a little JavaScript HTML component and run the SQL, get the data, and then put it on that. And then I can screenshot that, drop it into Slack, and send it to a business owner and be like, hey, here's what I've been seeing for our like cart drop off. And so you get this like really natural language kind of query process over data and data infrastructure. AI is good at taking denormalized data and adding some structure to it. And so for databases, it's a really nice use case.
Yeah, that's great. Because I know everybody's talking about in the context of writing code, but does it include databases always or not? But it looks like it does.
It can. So, if you break that stuff down. So like if I'm doing a feature like password reset is a really good one, I will say in one of my features or one of my like discrete executables, like I want to add to my user a reset token and I want to flip a flag. And then I want to check if the user has started password reset, then their current password no longer works. So like we need to add an if statement during the login flow, say, hey, your password no longer works. You have to do you want us to resend an email? And generate the SQL that will alter the table to add the reset token, and then when they reset their password, make sure you clear that token, like all that kind of stuff. But that goes into these discrete executables.
Yeah. So how do you get through leadership and technical leadership specifically to get to start using this more and more in organizations? And I think you with your company trying to do that. What would be your first steps or advices to companies to start implementing this and getting more efficiency, I guess?
Yeah, I kind of like block out engineering teams when we engage with them into kind of 3 groups. So in a reasonably sized engineering team, there will be a handful of AI advocates that exist. Whether leadership is excited about them or not is one thing, but if they're hiring us, they tend to be excited. But these AI advocates are likely already using AI, whether they're supposed to be or not. And they're probably seeing some pretty significant gains. And then there's some skeptics, and those skeptics are kind of like peeking around a curtain, being like, is that actually working? I'm not sure. And then there's like kind of the people digging in their heels that are just like pure holdouts. AI will never work. It's, it's all kind of hype and magic tricks, and it's not going to work. I'm going to write my own code. So if I'm a leader, you asked, how do I get leadership involved? So I'll answer that too. But if I am a leader, my goal is to quickly identify the advocates and then empower them, give them platform, have them rotate between teams, shout out the work that they're doing, because what you're doing then is you're giving permission to the skeptics to more deeply engage. And your holdouts are never going to engage, so you just kind of ignore them. And they'll they'll drop off into obscurity fairly quickly. If I am a developer who is loving these AI tools, and I want my leadership to more deeply encourage those things, my job is to show real return and real value. And it's not that hard, but it's like, hey, engineering manager, I want to talk to you and show you like how I got 6 tickets done between Monday and Wednesday, when normally it takes me between, a whole week to do 6 tickets. And so can I show you these tools I'm using? Can I get like an enterprise blessing on them? How do I get the rest of the team to use them? And if you can show real results, not just like, look how cool it is, I can generate an app, but like in our code base, with our features, in our backlog, I was able to move faster. I was able to write good code still. And that most leadership that I've encountered, like they want the team to be more productive. And so they'll start to engage. Where you can't, the one thing I would caution an advocate on is like blind optimism. Because a part of any change management, introducing new tools, new process, new methodology into an organization or a team, is about understanding where it does work and where it doesn't work. And if you're just like, AI should do everything, it's so good, it's going to change the world, like everybody will they'll look at you like some like nutcase on the street. And so instead you're like, hey, here's where I've been able to use it, but I was trying to use it in our Scala code base, and I just can't get it to like understand Scala very well. So I think we just have to keep using, normal development. But man, when I start moving to the React side of the world and I use AI, it's just so fast. Like, so that kind of, that metered optimism and realistic perspective on where the value creation actually is helps leadership make a case to say, okay, here's how I'm going to get more people on board. Because a skeptic is going to be excited about opportunity, but they're going to take any negative that someone told them it'll work. So if you're like, it can write all the code in the world, and then they open up the Scala code base and it doesn't, they're like, see, it doesn't work. I told you so. And so if you're approaching that as an advocate saying, hey, in the Scala code base, it's really not that good. Like, let's just ignore that for a little while. Then the skeptic doesn't have this like scapegoat to go hang a hat on and say, see, no AI works because it doesn't work here. We shouldn't be doing it at all. And so that would be my advice.
Yeah, no, that's great. It reminded me of a story I heard from some other podcast, and this person basically was saying, we're expecting AI to know everything about everything, to know every programming language, every database, every framework, everything. But in humans, we don't do that. We hire a developer for very specific tasks with very specific skills and things like that. So we need to translate that message about AI as well, that it's not yet know everything about everything. It's still also evolving and learning, and it's getting better by day. So we'll get there.
It's the same. It's like so true. It's the same as the context thing I was saying earlier. Like, we expect AI to like drop into a massive code base and be able to like edit it immediately without telling it anything about the code base. And like, we would never expect that of a person. We expect self-driving cars to never crash, but we don't expect people to not crash their cars. Like, that's part of driving. We expect AI customer support bots to never give away a coupon code when, they shouldn't, but a human customer support, gives them away all the time when they shouldn't. Like, it's, we're applying a higher level of expectations to these systems. And kind of back to your very first question of like, what do people do wrong is they apply those, they expect AI to do a lot more than it's capable of. It's like if I buy I love doing woodworking. It's like how I unwind. And so I go buy a really nice table saw. It's not going to make my furniture better. Like, I can't expect it to build the table for me. And like, AI is a really nice table saw, and it has a purpose, and it fits in the shop, and I can use it, and it can make me better and safer and do things that I couldn't have done before when I was just using, a track saw. But I need to learn to use the tool, and I can't expect it to do everything.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great point. So we're almost at the end here. Do you have anything else to add as an advice or final word from your experience, or anything at all? Something maybe we didn't talk.
I don't know. I tweeted this out today, and it just like more and more feels true to me is every developer in the world should be engaging with AI. If you are not, like, you are risking falling into obscurity, losing your job, like not being, not having the skills required in the future. Like, you should be toying with these things. And if your current workplace doesn't allow it, you should be finding time to engage with these tools and really learn them. Because the only way right now, there's such a new technology. The only way to realize how capable AI is to use it. There aren't good guides. There aren't good courses. Every few weeks, new capabilities are released into the world that these things have. And so, like, if you are not writing an AI app, you should be using AI to write your apps.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Austin, thank you very much. A wealth of knowledge. It was great having you on. And I hope we can talk more in the future.
Oh, this was super fun. Thanks for having me. And I always love talking about it. And I mean, I could talk about software if I'm not writing it for hours and days.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Austin. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.